Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who owes allegiance to no one and will do anything for money, who comes and goes like the wind, who would slit his mama's throat for a nickel.
Nope, I'm not saying it. I'm not. Tim Longo.
You know I named that character after you in my play, so, you know.
Oh, yeah?
Shadow?
Wait.
Yeah, he's Timmy in my play.
Oh, great. Okay, awesome. Yeah, Shadow.
And this, on Mother's Day, you'd slit your own mama's throat.
I know.
You're brutal, sir.
You do what you need to do, I guess. Shadow's a good character. I enjoyed playing with him. Until he just walks away and abandons
Until he's
you.
just like, later. Smell you later. Yeah. Hey, wait a minute. Come back with, you've got my black belt. Ugh.
Yeah. Although it looked like, did
I think it's probably in the inventory.
Did they just give it back to you? Yeah.
I was just joking with the stream. Yeah. Anyway, we're talking about Final Fantasy VI. We are, of course, returning to this after a week off having an interview last week with Remy Lacoste about his camera work, his start of his camera career, really, in games with Prince of Persia last week, which was awesome. That was a great conversation. I was glad we finally got to talk to him.
Yeah.
After mentioning him for years, I feel like whenever we talk about cameras and like how you have to work closely with level design, and it always feels like Remy's name comes up in those conversations. So. It
was, it's funny. It is funny to kind of have some closure there, I think, to have him on finally, which I never really told him that we talked about him so much. And
ears are probably burning. Yep. So now cameras are a solved issue. I guess it's not a problem anymore in games. Thanks to Remy's work.
Just hire Remy. That's your answer.
Yeah, there's a solution. Anyway, or watch his talk. You can get a lot just from that.
For sure.
Let's dive in, pun intended, to the story stuff from this week. I think we'll start with the story stuff because it ends with a split and splitting the party. We were talking about some D&D stuff beforehand. That's always I always think of splitting the party when we talk about my campaign, because you guys often do. So last time, as I recall, I'd gotten a little bit past where you were. You were still in South Figaro. So maybe you should kind of catch me up on that part. I think I remember everything that's going on there.
I think, let's see, I had just gotten there, I think, at the end of the first episode. And so, I think this one I recall because I played on Saturday, so it was a little ways ago. You spend a lot of time in South Figaro. I did, at least, because there were kind of some secret areas in the town, which I thought was cool, and having like going behind the buildings via the sort of the way they are clipping the art and stuff, and I thought that was pretty neat. In fact, there's one room that you go into. Of course, these games are hilarious because you're just basically invading people's privacy left and right, and no one seems to care. And so you go in and this guy's eating and his wife's there, and she says, "Man, there's a draft or something. I wonder where that draft's coming from." And I'm like, I bet you I know where it's coming from. And then you go behind this bookcase and there's like a stairway that goes down. It's just pretty cool. So that was fun to kind of just navigate the way that they sort of designed that town. But then I think after that, you go to the mountain to find, I think you're finding Duncan. Wait, is it Duncan?
The Returners.
The Returners. You go to the Returners base, which is, you're trying to find the Rebel base on Yavin 4. So,
on Sabin 4.
Sabin 4, yeah. And you do fight a dude before you go inside that I think Sabin comes out and kind of talks to at some point. What was his name? He was kind of like a mini or boss or something.
Right. I don't remember his name, but
I must have put his name down, but maybe not. So then you go inside and you meet the old dude or the older dude who is now with you, that starts with a D, I think. Shoot, I didn't write his name down either. Damon, who's with Terra. Well, you didn't play that section, so he's kind of a spellcaster type. Banner. Yes. That's right. Yeah. So and he's there, and so
he's on the raft too. So I have seen him a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. The raft part was before the split up. Right. Is that right? Okay,
yep,
I forgot the order of operation. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So you meet him, and you meet some of the others, and then I think that section kind of ends where the Empire's attacking, right? And basically everyone sort of decides they have to go and do a thing, and that's maybe where things split up.
Exactly, right. So basically, Locke says he's gonna try to find out what's going on and maybe slow them down a little bit in South Figaro. So he's gonna go there. And Sabin actually, so what happens with the rest of them is that they go down this river, but Sabin in a fight gets knocked free of the raft and floats away on his own. So that's how he gets separated.
Right.
And then you go into this area where they're just basically saying, hey, you can choose to do any of these things. A Moogle walks onto the screen, which I think is very funny. There's that theatrical presentation stuff we talked a lot about in Final Fantasy IX. How they're willing to just go ahead and pull back the curtain and say, yes, hey, by the way, you're playing a video game. It's now you have to pick, which part of the story you want to experience next.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a black screen, abstract black screen.
Right.
And they're talking sort of directly to you as a player in a way. There's another example of that later where this somebody called Imp or an Imp comes on screen to
interesting. Yeah,
describe
different name for me. You have different translation.
Oh,
mine was
green,
called Kappa. Yeah,
the green guy. Yeah, the green one that basically described how to use a new character you get. Yeah, so that was another example of that. But yeah, and there's a save point in the middle of the black screen as well, so you can just save there. And then they return. So you basically get to choose which party split you want to play, whether you stick with Terra, go after, go play Locke and what he's doing, or Sabin. So I chose Terra first, and so she has Edgar and Banner, whatever his name is.
Banner,
with her, so they continue on the raft and they eventually get to obviously to Narsha. I just need to start writing all these names down in my notes so I can, but there's just so many names. I mean,
there are a lot of it's proper noun soup for sure.
Yeah, which is, I guess, it's an RPG. So but we both
you should know it all, dude. You're the lore guy.
I know. I don't. It just for some reason this particular fiction doesn't sink in quickly for me. I don't know why.
I think part of the problem is everything's so short because they're using in we've talked about this before. In 8 characters of Japanese, you can write about a town being lifted on the summer winds or something like that. And in English that would be swins. They just can't fit it in, right? All the characters' names are short. I can't put Tim Longer Jr. As my character name, so I have to go with Timmy. So
but you'd think that would help me though, would have shorter names, like the more
they're not as evocative, right? I mean, I think it's
not.
easier to remember something that has a little bit more to it.
I mean, so starting off with the sort of the party split is, I'll just obviously call out that was, I guess I feel like maybe they did that some in Final Fantasy IX, but not in a sort of such a discreet way, but maybe certain characters would sort of leave. I feel like the sort of just selecting the characters you want to come with you was pretty quick in 9, and that was kind of just the structure after that. So I was surprised. I don't know if this is a thing in Final Fantasy or not, but I was surprised about the character or the party split, and it was kind of neat. I think for me, it's ending up being a pretty neat way to introduce multiple new characters fairly quickly, because each of the parties that have split off, obviously I don't know who Locke finds because I haven't played that one, but I've played the other two. I guess in Tara's case, I won't spoil anything, but yeah, anyway, so definitely in Sabin's case, which we both played, we get 3 new characters introduced. One we technically had seen in South Figaro before, but was not in the party. Shadow,
right?
He was in the pub, which I loved that they introduced him and then you didn't get to use him right away. So when you do see him later, there's a little bit of connection there. But I just like, I don't know how they're going to do this once we play all 3 versions, or if this is just like a structure of the game where we're going to be bouncing between multiple groups, or if it's going to go back to the traditional, like, okay, you've been presented with 12 characters, who you want to bring with you.
Right. I think it's going to be more of that, because I know that there are, so we've had some email already about, hey, make sure you have this person and this person in your party, because you end up with different cutscenes and things like that, based on who's in your party at different points. So, which is similar to Chrono Trigger, right? So, in Final Fantasy IX, just to put a pin in that, there were periods where you separated for story reasons, but they tended to be brief, and there was no sort of pick which way you want to go either. It was just, you go to these people. You can remember, like, the knight and Zidane, I think, got locked up in that swinging cage, and other people were doing something else while they were in there, and but it was all just sort of, it was linear completely. You weren't making decisions about who, in what order you wanted to do those sorts of things.
Right.
The story just determined.
Right. Yeah. It just forced you to not be able to use certain ones at certain times. Yeah.
Which they could have done here. It's kind of interesting to think about. Well, I wonder why. Like, why have this theater presentation mode, where you're kind of behind the scenes of, like, okay, the game's going to continue now, but you get to pick the order. Are they just experimenting? What do you think about that?
Did we? I know we talked about it in the first episode, but I definitely won't remember. What was the order of operations for this versus Chrono Trigger? Which one came out first? Were they being developed at the same time, or because
they were being developed around the same time? I think Chrono Trigger came out after this. I will. Yeah, because
the reason I'm asking is because it feels like there's some experimentation going on with this one, because there isn't much. I mean, as far as I can tell, which one you pick in which order doesn't really matter. There's no implications to it. But
this came out a year before Chrono Trigger.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know. I'm just going to guess, like, because of some of the, as franchises progress, the teams learn things and they have criticisms over previous versions, and and I don't know, maybe the linearity of kind of getting characters at a certain order based on the story was something that they felt was a negative toward previous versions, and so they're fooling with that some now. I think there's some Chrono Trigger feeling structure to this too. That's why I was asking about that. But my my exposure to this genre in the series is very limited, so it's hard to say. Like, I mean, if you told me that this was a thing that happens in all of them, I wouldn't be surprised. But,
right.
But it sounds like it's often very linear. Despite that, I don't know if it's just I'm starting to understand what the Final Fantasy sort of aesthetic really is or not, but this one so far feels like 9 to me in some way.
That's intentional, or 9 was intentionally made to feel like these. Yeah. Like 9 was a love letter to previous Final Fantasies for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially after 8, I think, which was,
and probably 7 as well,
and 7 to some degree. I mean, you would recognize 7, 8, 9 all have a lot of things in common in terms of presentation. So you would definitely recognize it and it wouldn't feel lost. But 9 definitely most echoes this game in particular, Final Fantasy VI. So
yeah, I mean, I think some of it is sort of tone and maybe like story themes, as well as obviously art style, like 9 being sort of really the first one that I, played at any great length. But it's sort of stylized characters, right, and such, right? Even in the in the high-res cinematics, they didn't do what they do in this one, where, even the high-res cinematics, the characters looked cartoony, so it was interesting. Yeah, big heads. It was interesting that they kept that aesthetic, and 9 does feel like a sort of a throwback, sort of retro, update to this. So it's interesting we played them, obviously out of order. So, yeah. So, but I think like I talked about in the first episode, for whatever reason, the 16-bit element of it, it just doesn't. The things that I miss from Western RPGs is not as apparent because of the 16-bit presentation. So I'm actually really enjoying, I don't know. I kind of like the tomfoolery that happens is just a lot more acceptable to me, because it feels like a more not retro game, but just a throwback kind of game. And so I'm actually really, I enjoyed 9 as well, but there's just larger, I think, hills for me to get over with that one.
Yeah. It's pretty charming. Generally, the characters are charming. The 16-bit, it's a pretty warm look as well. It feels pretty comfortable to walk around in as well. Even when you're in spooky places like the swamp, which we'll get to. So I think that all works well. The other thing with splitting is that it sort of means there's no guarantee you're going to be predisposed to certain of the characters you're going to meet sooner. I think it's, like you said, it's great that they introduce a bunch of characters that way. That also means you're going to see and experience all of those characters, and possibly in different orders, and not sort of be naturally pushed to have this character or that character in your party because you did them in a particular order, because that order is not fixed, right? So, so you really get a chance to sort of feel out all of those characters and determine which ones you like to play, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a clever, again, maybe they were trying to solve that problem, which again, it ends up being linear for whomever plays it. But I don't know, maybe if you, maybe I don't know, you read in a magazine at the time or something like that, maybe which direction you'd want to go. And I don't know, but probably not. I mean, we always debate sort of the strategy guide, issue of the time, where it was like, how intentional were some things that were left unclear. So people would want to buy a strategy guide, but anyway.
Well, one of the characters we get in this section, I guess it's Locke's section, so you didn't get this character, but somebody went and looked, because whatever that character's power was, I didn't understand when to use it, and somebody went and looked. I was like, I should have read the manual, and they're like, they go and look, and it's like that character's on like page 68 of the manual. And I'm like, I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So, it's just it's a different time. So, I mean, I think the manuals were more robust at the time for sure, which is, it's funny playing another Sakaguchi title at the same time. The Last Story, the manual's pretty thin, right? It's one of those packed inside with the DVD manuals that we've all come to love and ignore. So,
yeah.
Although I end up referring to that one frequently because I can't remember any of the buttons, because going between games, I just forget. Like, what can I do in this one again? Oh, right. Yeah, you can command the whole party this way. Okay.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, you're playing it in a pretty challenging manner, having playing both of those at the same time, I bet.
Yeah, sometimes. It's more just like they introduce a thing once, and they don't tend to put a lot of HUD on the screen. They'll be like, you do this to get this thing. You have to just look it up if you don't remember the one time they told you. Tutorialization is, it's still a hard problem. We tend to be more, these days we're more like, we'll just put it all on the screen. I mean, I couldn't figure out with Sabin. We should get back to him and talk about his storyline, because it's the one we both played. I could not figure out for the life of me how to execute his special moves. And I'm glad I was streaming it, because people were explaining to me. I felt like an idiot. I felt like a prize idiot. Like, you do what now? And they're like, no, see, what's happening is you're pressing A too many times and it's canceling your input. And I'm like, what? You know, I felt stupid. Well, because I was thinking it was like a timing thing, because when I first met him, he was the only one. So you were doing it right there when he was doing it, when I get going to do the attack, right? So I thought it was like once his attack came up, you had to enter it like in a certain amount of time. So I was like waiting until he goes to actually land his attack. But no, you program it in when you select his thing.
Yeah.
But those things were very close together when he was the only guy in the party, you know, when he was fighting that boss with the two bears. So I just was confused. It didn't register with me what the order of things was that was happening. Anyway, finally got that worked out.
Did you have?
So, did you suplex the train? Is really the question I was trying to get to.
Oh, so I was going to ask, did you have like a little tutorialization about how like a Kupo came on, or not a Kupo, but what do they call them?
The imp, you mean?
The Moogle?
Oh, the Moogles, yeah.
A Moogle came on.
Kupo is what they say, yeah.
Yeah, right. And a Moogle came on and described to me how to do his moves. Did that not happen for you in your version, or? Because it was literally like, come on, and you press left, right, left, and don't worry, you have all the time in the world. Like, it was very literal hand-holding me through that. But I only know one move, so maybe
he has 3. You can actually look in the skills tab in the menus.
Oh, I did not even think to do that. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't tutorialize that at
Pummel.
all. Right, Pummel is the first one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He actually has 3. There's one that's called like Aura Beam or something like that, and then Suplex, which I was streaming this, and we got to the final fight with the train, which we'll talk about story-wise in a moment. And I didn't suplex because I didn't know the button combo. And people were like, you have to suplex the train, because he literally goes and the sprites go connect, and like he goes off the screen and then comes back down with the sprite upside down
of the train.
Do the suplex of the train. It's hilarious. So I actually went back. I reloaded the save from before that fight so that I could do it again for people, because they wanted to see it. They said it's a rite of passage. So
that's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah. How funny.
I will say I really liked the Sabin story. Dark as it was, I loved him going into this like enemy base and listening, and then Shadow was involved. And you felt, because he feels like kind of a ninja, you know, he has throwing abilities and things like that, and a dog.
He's
yeah,
pretty cool.
Yeah, it's hilarious. And you're kind of sneaking around in there, and then, you know, trying to understand what they're doing, and they're besieging this town or city, I guess, Doma, the castle, and they poison the water supply as soon as this general leaves. He's called back to talk to the emperor or whatever.
Gestalt or whatever.
Yeah. Kefka takes over, and he's been the one we've kind of known to be a bad guy in your cutscene, which I watched. He's the clowny looking one with the very colorful robes. And of course he looks that way sort of in the game.
Yeah, in the manual too.
Yeah, right, and in the manual, in his 16-bit glory. Yeah, so he's very, he's diabolical, and he basically poisons everybody in that castle. So that was dark stuff, man. Yeah. That was rough.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, like, at the time, because you know, you can impose your own darkness to it. It's presented obviously in the way that it's presented, and they, as a quick aside, like one of the notes I wrote down, just as far as like the presentation of essentially cinematics, because they do so much emoting with the sprites, the 16-bit sprites, you know, and I mean, they have so many expressions, and they script them to kind of do all these, you know, these emotes, and and it'd just be very fascinating. I'd be fascinated to see how they build those, because they have a lot of little details happen, and it's just enough to kind of get the impression of what the attitude of the characters are, from just a few different frames of animation. It's pretty impressive. But yeah, I mean, it's like, it's obviously presented poisoning. It's presented in a very melodramatic way, but when you think about it, it's actually pretty dark. And so I often wonder in times like that of whether the developers intend for it to be dark, or because it's rendered in the way that it is, that they get away with the melodrama of it, right? Because Kefka specifically is a mustache twirling kind of villain.
Yeah, he's a bit over the top. Yeah.
So, but if you think too hard about it, it's pretty rough, especially what happens with Cyan's family, which is the character you meet in Doma. Yeah.
Yeah, that part of it was very. I like when it went in there, I was like, oh no, they're not going to do this. Like, I was very surprised because of, and most of the people watching when I was playing had played this as children, like 10-year-olds. Yeah, and I'm thinking, wow, that's some dark stuff. To throw at a kid like that. And then to go back through, you get kind of a neat sort of revenge with Cyan. I don't like the name Cyan, so for me, I renamed him Cyrano because he also talks sort of like Glenn did in Chrono Trigger with the these and the thous. So I like that he's gone crazy basically after he's like gone mad, and now he's like a whirling dervish of combat. In fact, like he's literally like bouncing between multiple things that he's fighting. I accidentally got in the way of him and got knocked over trying to get to him to help. I was like trying to figure out how to, because at that point Sabin needs to join up with him to move the story forward.
Oh,
and then,
right. Yeah.
Then you basically cool fight your way through the base. Yeah.
That's a good example of what I'm talking about, as far as like they have this idea that they want to present a moment in the game, and the only tools they have are the sprites and the game world. And they find a way to script in these moments of, it's like, it's so weird and so funny that they another way that games of that era would do it is just to kind of have like talking heads at the bottom of the screen with text,
right.
But they're actually they're doing it all in engine, so to speak, in the play space. So it's sort of like the early version of like cinematics being done with the same assets as the game assets,
right?
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that we have now, where there's no division. I don't know. It's just kind of a fascinating.
And they're even mechanically interactable at points, right? I mean, in that section, you can see he's having these big fights where he's fighting, presumably multiple enemies. And it's at least two, but often sprites represent more than one. So you've got that going on, and you're trying to get to him to try to help. And if you go in between him and the guys, he'll knock you over, and that's that's so cool. I mean, that's a really cool thing that they're like, you're putting yourself in harm's way to do that. And they just do it with the game's mechanics and, recognizing the collision and, animating the sprite. Right. And I mean, it's not complicated, from a standpoint of implementation necessarily, but to think of doing it with the mechanics, I think, is somewhat inspired. So, because they're not doing the cheap and easy thing, which is, hey, I could use some help over here. Oh yes, I'll come help you. I mean, like they could have done that and it would have been lesser, but I don't think anybody would have faulted them either. Right. So, it's good. I love that stuff.
Yeah, and I think Sabin's, to your point about like the base infiltration and the poisoning of, and then the castle, you meet Cyan and then progressing from there. I mean, Sabin's wing of the split. I've only played 2 as well, but there's a lot that goes on in it. Like a lot of different things happen. And so it's it's a good example, and I think an impressive example of something that I know we talked about with Final Fantasy IX, where we're already seeing the sort of variety that they throw at you, which I think is a big difference, in my opinion, of Western versus Eastern RPGs. Because in Western RPGs, usually it's a more holistic set of systems and mechanics that you consistently use in different ways along the way. But, they just customize so many different things in at least the Final Fantasy games. And I guess they sort of did, although Chrono Trigger was a little more cohesive, I guess I'd say. Chrono Trigger was a little bit more westernized in that way, or at least not westernized, but it was a lot more holistic. But anyway, like, there's just so many different varieties and modes of gameplay, different camera views, and then we have the mode 7 stuff, and then there's vehicles, and there's all sorts of different things going on. And in Sabin specifically, you're fighting on a waterfall, you're fighting under the ocean, it's just very like epic, and it feels epic even in the 16-bit version. So I can imagine as a kid playing this game on an N64, and just like, you just never know what's going to be coming next, because it could be anything.
I was very surprised with that Phantom Train that happened. Like, what? And now I'm fighting on a train, right? I'm doing a train sequence. I'm moving. The train's moving. Yeah. It's good parallax. Actually, that whole environment, the swamp too, has pretty good parallax. Yeah. It's all just really, really well executed, and it makes you think. I mean, this is getting towards the end of the SNES life cycle, and they're really getting every possible thing out of the machine, which is, we talked about last time, sort of why they, Square abandoned Nintendo after that, because they stuck with the cartridges. But but you can see what you can do when you're getting to the end of a life cycle of a system that you really, really know very well, and that you've learned all these ways. It's sort of like, and you alluded to like people doing these sorts of games, today as indies, and it makes me think of something like the revival of a silent film with The Artist, for example, of like people are looking back at all these techniques that people developed over the course of 25 years of the silent film era, roughly, 2-3 decades, and like all the things they learned about storytelling in that form, only to then have it, disappear, right? And now we're doing a different form. Of course, we do that every 7 years still, or so. And they were at the cusp of doing that again. But as you get to that mature end of that era, you really know what you're doing. You have lots of tricks to pull on. And so it's fun to see people still playing with that stuff today.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not threatening that I would do this, because I just don't think I will, and I won't have the time, and I really would need the time and the interest, the heavy interest. But I'd be fascinated to play Final Fantasy VII and then play the remake and see, like, to your point, there's the indie revival of these sorts of genres, right, but there's also like, what does Square do? What do they do when they are trying to modernize something that has a sort of formula that's beloved, and apparently, the buzz around it is that they did a pretty good job so far. So I don't know. It's just kind of, it'd be really interesting to see how you have the indie side of reviving these and kind of polishing them for a modern audience, and then you have like a big budget studio doing it. So what's the difference there?
Yeah, I'm very curious. I have the remake first part that was part of PlayStation Plus at one point recently, so at some point I'll get to it. I had been threatening that I would just wait until they finished it, but
that'll be years. Yeah,
it's going to be a long time. But also it's like, well, I'd rather just play the thing end to end. But anyway, not important.
Nope. Yeah, but back to Sabin though. The train, I think the theme of the train, like being a train to the afterlife, I think is interesting. I didn't even see Cyan's family coming, but once I saw the people, I was like, oh shoot, that's right, all those people just died.
All these people are coming from Doma, right? Yeah, because you've just basically left the area of Doma, gone and found the train, and the train is basically taking you back to Doma. Not really, it kind of doesn't. But it's sort of like a spiritual journey, back to Doma with all those dead people.
Yeah, yeah. And the train in general, like I think on one of the other notes I wrote down that they just, this one seems to reinforce. I mean, I guess 9 had, I guess they all do, but the sort of like steampunky nature of this game is definitely a big focus for them. The sort of like, there was some story bit where somebody was talking about how machines were given life or magic or energy or espas or something like humans were, like they were equating the two together, and so that would be reinforced by the train sequence, where the train actually is the boss and you fight the train and it's talking to you, and it's just so funny. But it was memorable, right, and exciting, and I wish I would have suplexed the train, but I know. Yeah,
you missed your rite of passage, man. Yeah.
You
can go check the VOD. It was it's there.
Yep.
Very entertaining.
So what happened after the train? So then you eventually get to that peninsula that I can't pronounce. Starts with a V. Veldt.
The veldt. Yeah, the veldt.
Yeah.
That's a word. That's what.
Okay. What is the
in Africa? The African, the veldt is like the savannah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's another word basically. That's a famous Bradbury story. The veldt.
Okay.
It's the one where the kids are in the room and they have the immersive television, and they want to play on the veldt, and their parents go in and are apparently eaten by lions because the TV's so real. I don't know if you've ever read that story.
No, I haven't read that one.
It's one of his many short stories, but one of his most famous. So that's why I know that the word veldt is from that. But yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's basically a wild area.
Where
with lots of like predator and prey animals interacting together. Like a really big wide open space. So,
and somebody in the town down there says something about how that area is where all of the monsters and animals migrate to. So, when you're fighting in the plains there, at least for myself, I mean, there was just a wide variety of basically any creature could pop up there, which makes sense because it's almost like they have a whole area devoted to this one character that you find, which is Gao, I guess is maybe how you pronounce his name. Yep. Which is like, I made a note about like, what is their deal with like primitive humans? Because it's like, that's a whole thing in Chrono Trigger too. And they're kind of represented very similarly, and the music's very similar. And it's like, I don't know, it's so weird. There's probably some good reason for it, but it's such a fun.
Well, I mean, I think it ties into some of these themes of like the, modernization versus, prehistoric, and the real spirit of man or something like that. How they develop this, if you talk to the people in town, one of them will tell you that, this kid was thrown out by his father. I think his mother had died or something, and he gets thrown out, and he basically is running around with the animals. I mean, I think they're basically justifying his ability, which is to learn monsters' abilities, which is pretty cool.
He's really neat. I mean, that mechanic. I don't know if I will ultimately, when we are given a choice, if I will keep him, because it's a little overwhelming, to be honest, to have so many. Like, I don't,
it's hard to know what to pick, right? I mean, it's like, well, what did this creature have? And, is this a good time to use this? It feels a little, it feels like a lot. Yeah, for sure.
Just let me throw some ninja stars and I'll be fine. But I don't know, maybe I need to look at the menu though, now that I'm thinking about it, because you mentioned the thing with Sabin's skills. Maybe they give you some information with Gao's skills to tell you what
possibly
each one does.
I didn't think to look.
if that is the case, then it would give you a lot of information about the enemies, I would assume too, like what they're throwing at you and what their vulnerabilities might be. But I thought it was an interesting concept. I mean, that peninsula is almost like a little bit about, like Pokemon has that one area, usually has an area, don't they, where you sort of like can hunt like multiple different types of Pokemon. And so it felt like sort of like, oh, this is a little bit of a collection kind of situation here if you use this character. But I just was impressed with how different Gao is. I mean, then we didn't even talk about Cyan too much, but he has the whole sword tech thing, which is very weird. Like, because I didn't get the impression that the bar, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but just to speak about him for a second, like the number bar that is slowly rising as you select his sword tech, I don't think those are more powerful. They're just different. They're just different abilities. And
I think some later ones will definitely be more powerful. But I don't think 2 and 3 particularly are. I think 4 was one that looked that people wanted me to do, but didn't remember which number it was, and I didn't have it yet. The one that they wanted me to do was 4.
Okay, yeah, I don't have that one. We have the same ones, of course.
Yeah,
But like two seemed like maybe a debuff or something. So it's like I didn't, you know what I mean? Like it was very different. He doesn't even, at least for me, he didn't even swing his sword or anything. But it's such a weird concept, you know what I mean? To wait, for that to happen. I assume there's
instead of just picking it. Well, I mean, if we're both doing the wait mode, right? Time would still be continuing normally. So the trade-off would be, I'm going to wait and try to do the 4, or whatever, the 5 or the 8. Oh my God, the 8, whatever the 8 is.
You could get hit during that time.
That people could be getting, taken apart while you're doing that. Yeah, so we are losing. We are losing some of those things by going to the wait mode. I'm not going to do the active mode, but we are missing out on some of those moments. But I'm too old for that now. Honestly.
I actually had to look it up because I was confused, and I looked in the manual as well. I was confused about the wait mode because I had the wait mode on, but it only waits when you're in a sub menu. And so I thought it just was traditional turn-based, but it's not. It's only if you don't go into a sub menu, they will keep attacking you if you don't.
Yeah, you gotta like hit the A button as soon as you can, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and get into because it has to be like into like the spells menu or an item menu or something like that for the way that it works. So at least for my version, even if I select attack and I'm selecting one of them, the timer's still going. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So it's not a full turn base. So I didn't understand that right away. But anyway, that's just whatever. But yeah, with the Gao, like I they had that tutorial moment where they kind of talk about his thing. I didn't quite grok what they were saying, and so as soon as I got into combat, I just had him do the leap, and then he disappears and the combat ends. I'm like, wait, what just happened now? Like, where did he go? And I guess the idea is he goes off with the animals and learns
their ways.
It's very, very interesting. And then comes back eventually. Yeah. So, and I thought it was fun that you had to go to town and get some dried meat for him, and that was how you kind of lured him in. So as a whole sort of,
did you run into him before that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And you have to fight him. I was like, I don't want to fight him. Like that felt really weird. Like I have to go smack him, for him to run away so I tried giving him the only thing I had that was selectable as an item that sounded like food, which was the green cherry. I didn't know what it did. Yeah. But that's to heal an effect. If you get turned into an imp, like Kappa apparently is an imp, then you can use that. So,
Right. Yeah, I tried the same thing, funny enough. But yeah, it's neat to go into the towns and find those little clues about things if you talk to everybody, where there's a person in town that says, I was out on the plains and this kid stole my dried meat, and then you go into the town or the shop right next to that person and there's dried meat for sale. So that's that's a great little structure for RPG structure.
It's that sort of adventure gamey. It's like not explicit quests, but it's sort of, you're just talking to people and getting information about the world in very tight little bursts, and you feel like everything's fairly important. So that I like a lot. The other thing to sort of touch on, since we've talked about sort of the difference of all these different mechanics we have with all these different characters, is to also, again, talk about the different modes of play. There's sort of, we just touched on the town mechanics are basically very similar to Zelda, for example, right? I mean, you walk around, you bump up against people and you say, hey, what do you have to say to me? But also, of course, you've got all the shopping and what have you there. This is only your fourth JRPG, I guess. What are the other ones you're picking out? You had kind of brought up this topic.
Well, I mean, if you break it down, there's different. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's sort of different states of play. They're a little bit more consistent in this one than maybe 9, I guess, as far as view. But you have your traversal through sort of side-scrolling / top-down, like isometric. I don't know. Yeah, I guess I'll just say side-scrolling adventure of caves, which or the forest or something like that, which you can still have random encounters happen in those. And then you have, obviously, like you said, the town sections, which are not non-threatening. And then there's obviously the open plains, which is the overworld section, which also has random encounters. And that's using the mode 7 stuff, which kind of scrolls the world around like it's kind of on a cylinder. And so you kind of get some of that parallaxing going on or what have you. And then they throw in additional, there's the train section, but then they throw in additional things like the river stuff, right, where you're actually like choosing which direction to go in. And it seems kind of, there's some heavy scripting going on there. But then also there's random encounters there too, with save games along the way. Like they're just stretching what this engine, I guess, was doing in different things. And then there's this weird sequence when you leave that peninsula, where once you get the breathing apparatus, where it's mode 7, but you're not controlling it. You're going through the street, like basically the currents under the ocean. And it's the weirdest freaking thing I've ever seen. It is
very weird. Yeah. It's a very weird thing.
Occasionally they give you kind of a QTE to basically select which direction you're going to go. And it's like, I have no idea. Like, how do I know what direction to go? It's like trial and error. So it's an interesting experiment, and you eventually get there, and then you end up, but it's basically a fast travel, right? It's like an elaborate fast travel with, and then you also have random encounters during that, which are under the ocean.
Under the water, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Like there is a mini scripted sequence where Sabin is jumping over the train cars. I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a jumping, like a Mario jumping section in this game at some point, where they're just like jump over the time thing, like I wish they would have allowed you to do that in the train section, but probably would have been frustrating. But yeah, and then there's the battle mode itself, right? Which changes screens. So I don't know. It's just typical, like we just played Baldur's Gate, and the sort of that engine, everything is just happening on the screen.
In the one thing,
it's just the one thing, and with an occasional cinematic. But
the map, the maps are overworld,
right?
There, but it's more just like a menu,
and it's presented in a way that like you could see sort of your characters have a map, you know what I mean?
Right.
Versus like you're not seeing your character walk around on the map like you do here,
right,
where
right.
You're like a really big dude walking over the plains, kind of thing. So, I mean, it's fine. It's a video game. I'm not worried about it. It's just and then I haven't even used the vehicles very much, but I guess you can hire a chocobo at any point. Where you can find one and then use that on the plains too. Is my memory right that basically
that happened when you left the castle that fell into the sand or that went under the desert?
Well, I found I've found a couple of Chocobo stables. If I hire a Chocobo,
you can hire them, right? And so the benefit to that and you might want to consider this, no random battles.
That's what I thought. Yeah. But then I worry about
then you worry about XP.
Whack. Yeah. So it's like, I mean, I still have the same kind of mental issues, psychological issues with random encounters, because I probably talked about this with Final Fantasy IX, but I really like exploring in games and generally like exploring on my own terms, and the random battle system, both in the overland and in the sort of 2D sections or side scrolling sections, it just discourages me to do that. And I know that it's good for me to do random battles because I get XP, but the sort of like psychological feel of that is just it's hard for me to get over, I guess.
Yeah, it's tough, particularly because we're still pretty resource constrained in terms of having. I mean, I had quite a lot of money at one point and bought a bunch of equipment, but
same.
But then I was out, right, and then I started actually in the section with Sabin for a long time. I was getting pretty low on those potions and tonics. I was like, ooh, I've only got. I think I was down to 1 potion and 3 tonics, and I had stolen a ton with Locke, the treasure hunter, because I had done his section, and I was like, well, I'll just, I basically always just steal with him, because why not? See if he can pick up a thing. Usually, can only get 1 thing per enemy, so it's pretty quick, and I was trying to build up some of that. I think I had over 20, and I was like, cool, I'll be great. And then I went to Sabin's section, and I'm like, oh, not great. I'm getting worked.
There's no healer,
right?
So you have to rely on consumables.
Don't forget too that on the overworld maps, you can use the tents and sleeping bags.
Yeah. I was using those too. Which
I got down to that point where I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to start. Everybody's low. Okay, perfect time for a tent. So, got to really think about that stuff at this point in the game. Just funny, the game. That's kind of the weird. It's a weird place to put the difficulty is in the resource stuff.
Yeah, because it's. I mean, you do pick them up from combat too, but it's random, so you don't know what you're getting.
Exactly.
You can't control that. Even the stealing you can't control. So yeah.
And you almost never get enough to you couldn't grind for items because you're taking more damage in the combats than the items will probably give you back. Right? I mean, it's like you fight something and you get a tonic. Well, it's like, well, if you took more than 50 points of damage, then you lost out on that deal, right? So it's because of the randomness of the rewards, and because of the how difficult the combat is, or whatever, how much damage it does on average. It's a losing proposition to grind for items. So I guess you could grind for the gil maybe and buy a bunch of items.
That's true. You sometimes get a fair amount of money from it. But how much are you using? I just sort of started dabbling a little bit with defense and row. Do you use defense? Do you change your row very often, or do you use defense very often on certain characters? I don't really know the strategy behind that.
Yeah, I don't do that a lot. I did with and I think you can set up their starting row in the menu, right?
You can do that too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that your casters.
You can do it on the fly too, though. Yeah.
Yes, but I did it with Banner when on the Wrath section. I would his first move, I would just move him to the back, and then. So he would take less damage, because if he died, game over. So I did that a lot. That might be the only time I really did it. I did it with Gao because I didn't want to attack him. So it was like having us defend, seeing if that would do anything. I mean, I basically tried a bunch of stuff to not have to hit Gao. And then I finally just I was like, I don't know. I don't have anything else I can figure out to do. I don't feel good about this. And I hit him, and then we just moved on. So it's like, oh, I guess that's what I was supposed to do. So that was weird. So no, I don't do a ton of it. But I can imagine doing moving your healer to the back row permanently and having that person defend until they're called upon to heal or what have you. Yeah. Or somebody using items and things like that. Like, okay, this person's going to defend in a tough battle. I feel like those things are really there for the bosses. when you want to really be very, very careful about how much damage you're taking.
Yeah, yeah, right. Really micromanage that stuff. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to. It's been a fairly easy game for me so far, which it's a double-edged sword because it can be a little less, especially with the random encounters, because it is so random. It can be a little less interesting. So if it's too easy, but I know that if it gets too hard, I will really be hating life. So I'm gonna knock on wood on that. But it'll be interesting to see how they ramp things up. I mean, I know we've had 2 sessions and we've played a fair amount, but I just kind of get the impression we've really only scratched the surface.
We've got a lot to go, and there's some big things happening in the future. So we'll probably end our conversation as far as that goes here. I think for our next section, we want to get to see, how do I describe this in a way that doesn't give away to you? I'm going to say a building in which a lot of singing goes on is the next section we want to finish through.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So I know that will mean something to people who have played it before or who are a little more aware of the game as I am. So we will. Okay. I don't want to give away what that means, but yeah. So let's turn to feedback. We have one review this week. It was sent to the Apple Podcasts infrastructure, etc. It has, I think, one of my favorite ever user handles that I've seen in the reviews. So why don't you go ahead and give that? I sent it over to you.
I just saw it myself. That is wild. Okay, so this review is...
the review itself is actually more like email feedback, honestly, but the name is terrific. So glad to have it.
Okay, yeah, this person's crack up. Final Fantasy VI from 668, the neighbor of the beast.
That's right. That's pretty great. Although you do have to do it in the proper Iron Maiden style. 668, the neighbor of the beast.
Okay, good. I'm glad you're here to do that for me.
You probably don't know that.
No, I'm not an Iron Maiden fan, but I can imagine. I was more Motley Crue. That was my shout at the devil. That was my jam.
Okay. All right. I hope you're listening, Mark.
Vincent Price. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, my first foray into RPGs, and I had no idea what was going on. I was playing someone's save game from a video rental, and when I attacked, a bunch of numbers showed up on the screen. A few years later, and older, obviously, I tried Final Fantasy VI again, knowing now how RPGs operate. I adore this game, and is tied as one of my favorite RPGs, along with Final Fantasy. What is that? 9 and Chrono Trigger. Interesting. Okay. Well, we will have played them all. Neighbor of the Beast. Good luck, gentlemen, and don't leave any party members behind. What does that mean? P.S. You're wrong about Edgar. He one of the best. Nope. Edgar will have to convince me that he is one of the best. So far, he is not great. Yeah, interesting. Well, thanks for the review. Appreciate it, neighbor.
Yeah, for sure, neighbor. Yeah. Hey, neighbor. Now, every time I think of Mr. Rogers, I'm going to also think of the neighbor of the beast. So we have one, strap yourself in here. This is from Mark Garcia. It's actually 2 emails that I'm combining because he meant to ask a question when he sent the original email, but he got too into his story, the subject of which is the saga of trying to play and complete Final Fantasy VI, Part 1. From Mark Garcia. Greetings, Brett and Tim. Chapter 1.
I imagine some background music happening, just starting up at this point. Some nice, like, adventurous background, somber background.
Okay, yeah, I'll try. If I can fit something in, I'll put maybe a little Raiders in there.
Yeah, sorry, I stepped over the title. So the title is
Chapter 1 it's Chapter 1 There and Back Again.
Okay. Great.
I know that Tim had mentioned on his stream that he was thinking about seeing if you could play another JRPG for the cast, and I had hoped that it might be Final Fantasy VI, or as he most likely calls it, VI. I was delighted to hear that you had chosen it for the next game, as it was a game that held a special place in my heart, even though I didn't actually play it to completion when it was originally released as Final Fantasy III, on the SNES. I was a Genesis kid, and as such, I missed out on just about every game that came out on the SNES. By the time my younger brother finally got a SNES for Christmas, I had already turned my sights to Nintendo 64 because Mario 64 just looked amazing. As such, I paid little to no mind to missing out on Final Fantasy VI until 1997 rolled around, and I picked up an indie hit that Square released called Final Fantasy VII. We had gotten an original PlayStation 1 a few years after in 64. By that time, Final Fantasy III carts were almost impossible to find, and those that could be found went for over $100. I settled into the idea that I would just never get to experience Final Fantasy VI, at least not at that time. Then 1999 rolled around, and the Final Fantasy Anthology was released, and with it, Final Fantasy VI. I didn't have the money when it was first released, but I assured myself that because it was now out on current hardware, I could save over the coming months and go pick up a copy 5 or 6 months after release. What I didn't realize was that while I would procure a copy, it would be way harder than I anticipated. I lived around Austin, Texas at the time and worked at a sporting goods store near some malls, GameStops, EB Games, and Best Buys. Having saved the money for the game, I decided that I would head out on my lunch break to find a copy, even if it meant that I had to skip eating. 1 hour, no food, and no game later, I returned to finish out my shift, frustrated that my search at over 10 stores had yielded nothing. I didn't have a cell phone, so I couldn't just call all the stores around me to find out if they had a copy. Since I worked in North Austin and was heading south, I decided that on my way home, I would just stop at any and all malls and stores along the way until I found the game.
Oh, no.
Sidebar here. My ex-wife is from Texas, so I've been to like more to Houston, but like 30 miles in a Texas metropolis is a lot of malls. I will tell you right now, because that's kind of how they grow it. It's like they just kind of stamp down the same sort of thing anyway. So
yeah.
30 miles south, over 15 stores in 2.5 hours after I clocked out of work later, and I still didn't have a copy of the game. Defeated, I returned to my parents' house, ate leftovers for dinner they had eaten an hour earlier while I'd been searching, and was preparing to turn in for the night. Before I did, though, my mother mentioned that they were headed to Hastings, kind of like a Barnes & Noble, in case you don't have them, in San Marcos. I agreed to join them for the ride, knowing that Hastings sold games, but acquiescing myself to the fact that if the major video game retailers didn't have the game, Hastings surely wouldn't. Imagine my surprise and elation when we walked through the doors, and when looking on one of the first shelves in the video game aisle, I found a pristine copy of Final Fantasy Anthology waiting for me. I snapped it up, paid for it, and then waited for what seemed like years for the rest of my family to finish their shopping so we could return home. I tore the shrink wrap off the game and thumbed through the instruction manual on my way home, my excitement palpable. Upon returning home, I delicately placed the disc into our PlayStation, pressed the power button, saw the green light come on, and nothing happened. As I would later find out, our OG PlayStation 1's disc laser had decided to die that day, and we wouldn't procure the newer, smaller PS1 mini mod until much later. You must be asking yourself, did I ever finish Final Fantasy VI? Well, the answer was not on the anthology version. I did finish it, but that is a story for another email on one of the next episodes. I've already taken up way too much of your time with this anecdote about the lengths I went to try and get my first taste of this fantastic game. Thank you, as always, for your insight and perspective on each episode of the cast. Best, Mark Garcia. So let's go over that roller coaster briefly, and then I'll do the follow-up email that he meant to include the question in. That is... that's a story.
Yeah, I mean it's a great story of just me reminiscing about trying to find games myself, ones that you really want to play, and just like the journey of the old days that you youngsters don't have to deal with anymore. So wow, Mark.
For me, I think the closest was Guitar Hero when that came out, and somebody had brought it into where I was working. It was right after I moved to Maryland that I saw it, and I was like, I have to have that. Like, I need to find that today. I've got to get it. And I did. I ended up calling around to a bunch of stores and had to drive very far out of my way to find a Guitar Hero at a Target somewhere. So I was a little luckier there, but
no, that's some bad luck. That's some bad luck for Mark, especially with the PlayStation. I mean, that's just crushing. That's crushing to have that happen. Yeah, for me, it probably would have been collector's edition of World of Warcraft, the original, when it came out, whenever 2004. Those were very hard to find, and I did a big search in the Bay Area and found one at a Fry's on the peninsula. But yeah, that was a good day.
You're probably like, yep, I remember that day well. and not just because it's my daughter's birthday.
Right, exactly.
Subject, an actual question. This is the follow-up email. Greetings, Brent and Tim. I realized that in my excitement to relay my harrowing experience of procuring a copy of Final Fantasy VI, I left off the actual question that I had for you. Specifically, my question focuses on the developer's intent around Ymir, Ymir, the lightning whelk, and its respective fight. At no other point in the game following this battle does the player encounter an enemy where they have to quote-unquote wait and time their attack at a specific time or otherwise be penalized with a powerful counterattack. That being the case, what do you feel the developers were trying to teach the player with this fight? Were they attempting to demonstrate that in the active time battle system, the time for enemy attacks doesn't pause, but marches on, even if the player idles on selecting their next move? Were they trying to slow down the pace of the battle to allow the player to explore the battle menu? I'd be interested in your input. Thanks, and sorry for having to send you 2 emails. Best, Mark. Oh, Mark, we love your emails, especially when they're so entertaining. Yeah, what are your thoughts there?
That's crazy.
Both of those things?
Yeah, I think his theories are great. I guess I'm just kind of stunned that they don't ever do it again. Like usually, I mean, obviously that's new information to me because I haven't finished the game, so I didn't know that would be the case. So usually they do that kind of stuff to teach you something you're going to be repeatedly doing over and over again. So yeah, I guess. I mean, if they did that to show you, so was this the first Final Fantasy game with active battle system? Is that what we had established as far as the 16-bit ones?
Oh, I don't know.
Anyway,
answer and say, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, like let's assume that that's one of the early ones at least. Like that, I guess that would be an interesting way to teach you that. But it's a little subtle. I would think that that you'd want to be a little bit more heavy-handed with that than in that case. Yeah, I don't know. Slowing down,
and also both of us flubbed it.
Yeah, well, I think that
even better, it's like
exactly.
What they're trying to teach, they don't do a good job of it.
No, plus the telegraphing, as we talked about, is not very good, I don't think, as far as like teaching you. So, I mean, to be honest, my snarky sort of realistic answer is I'm wondering if it was just like an idea somebody had and they wanted to show you, that. I mean, you may not meet this creature again, but there's got to be times when, I mean, this is a very binary way of telling you that damage types exist, isn't it? That, you don't want to, well, no, I guess it's not damage.
No,
type.
it's not, because you can use any
attack.
of the damage. Yeah.
Right. I was thinking that it was so
no, that was one of my interpretations as well. Yeah. I don't really know. I think those are reasonable conclusions to draw, that they thought those were going to be conveyed there. It's also possible, as I mentioned earlier, they may have been able to pack more into the Japanese in that section so that it was a little clearer. So that might be a thing to go. And I think somebody had sent us email with stuff about the localization, which I don't think we're going to get to. I think this is going to be the last mail, but we'll get to it eventually. So it's always possible when translating from Japanese that the Japanese are getting more, out of their, especially earlier games, that they're getting more out of their language. And so that it's a little easier to understand what their intent was there. And that we just kind of lose out because English is not as compressed. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean that's a pretty big difference, but could be a pretty big difference. But yeah, it's a stumper. I mean, I think we might be giving them a little bit too much credit for why they put that enemy there, but maybe not. Maybe it was a very intentional training exercise. They could have.
I mean, it's a snail, right? I mean, it's explicitly a slow creature, right? I mean, it's possible to me that was supposed to be about time. So
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, maybe the regular enemies, they weren't, all the traditional enemies in playtesting or themselves playing the game, they just realized that people weren't, they were going through battles quickly and they weren't really seeing the full
right.
effect of the system. And so this is a way to force people to see what the system's potential is. Because some battles are over very quickly, and you don't really you barely see any turns. So yeah.
Yep.
Good question.
All right, well, thanks for that. Yeah, for sure. That, of course, was sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. We have a whole bunch of emails, and we'll be getting to them over subsequent episodes. I think we'll be playing this one for a little while, so we will get to you all. So that is our show. I already mentioned where we're going to play to next. Folks should probably know what that means. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub, where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
You've been doing that Twitch thing Monday and Tuesday nights, I understand. Are you still stranding America?
Yep, Strands Across America is happening. I'm pushing myself a little further, and I just got to some lake section, and I think I'm probably around like Alabama right now. If I look at the, at the actual map of the U.S., it's obviously not state by state, but and you're skipping. I had a very harrowing last session because I chose to do a really hard mission on foot. I'm kind of forcing myself to play on foot. I don't know if I'll be able to do that the whole game, but I'm going to try. So it created a very, very terrible situation for me.
Yeah, so. I believe I saw that. I popped in and you had all kinds of packages being pulled off and hands pulling you down.
Yeah, it was bad. It got
you
worse.
Were in the time fall. It looked rough, and I couldn't stick around. But I am also streaming most weeknights, not Mondays because we record, but most weeknights at 7 Eastern Daylight Time, where I've been playing The Last Story, and on the weekends I play whatever we're playing for the cast. This is all at twitch.tv/Brett Duville. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton and commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers. Our logo is by Mark Garcia. Have fun jumping into the currents of the Serpent Trench this week, and good night.
Good night.